and getting situated, I am going to share with you just a very basic overview of what this past week looked like for all of them. So we, as a youth group, went to a place called City Challenge, and it's in Columbus, Ohio, and it's run by Rosedale International. If you're familiar with it, can you raise your hand if you've heard of Rosedale International, just so I know? Okay. The youth group has gone there in the past, so they've shared about it before. But if you want to give them a round of applause, this is the biggest group that we have ever taken. And we'll touch on that at the end of just how awesome it is, like for these high schoolers to take a week of their summer to go and serve in Columbus, Ohio. So while we were down there, the basic schedule of what they had us do, we get to stay at this big facility called the Rosedale International Center. And we had a pretty set schedule of, we would wake up in the morning, we would have quiet time, and, we would eat breakfast first and then have quiet time, and then we would have a set-aside time for quiet time, I already said that. And then we would have a session of some sort, some kind of teaching by one of the directors or a teacher. One time we had someone from Rosedale Bible College come and teach, and then from there we would eat lunch and then go into an outreach or a work project of some sort. And it was really pushed how whether you're working with people or you're doing a task, all of those things are meant to glorify God. We can glorify Him while we're scrubbing toilets, and that is A-okay. So what they're going to do, the first few people are going to share about those consistent things that we did, the things that happened every day, and then everyone else is going to share about the outreaches that they got to be a part of and step in and help out the ministries that are already taking place in Columbus. So I'm going to pass the mic off to Cole, and he's going to tell you about what quiet time was like.
So I'm sharing about quiet time, and so quiet time is about an hour that you're given this booklet, and in that booklet there are verses and questions that you should answer, and you go and find a spot in the RIC, and you sit there, and just peacefully you sit there, and you try to think over these verses and read these verses to yourself, and it's kind of hard not to sleep, but
So then for sessions, we had that every day after our quiet time, and our quiet time packets kind of went along with what we talked about during sessions for the week. So for every session, they were all centered around our theme, which was the forge. So basically the purification process. And a verse that kind of went with that is 1 Peter. It says, "So be truly glad. There is wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure many trials for a little while. These trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold. Though your faith is far more precious than mere gold, so when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world. We are being purified like gold in a fire. If we invite Jesus to work in us through times of hardship, we will be made more into His likeness."
I'm going to also talk about the sessions that happened with the Forge. So we had 4 different sessions. Our first session was called The Smith, which is the guy who works in the Forge. So this was God. So we talked about who God is and how we are supposed to interact with Him, which was really cool to see. It's not what we make God out to be. We looked into who God really is, and we looked a lot at Genesis during that session. Our second session was dying to self. So we read in Romans. In Romans, there's a part where it's just there's no one righteous, not even one. There's no one who understands. There's no one who seeks God, and it just goes on and on and on. And we did a Bible study on it, and I think my group was just that made me feel very bad. I feel awful about myself now. No one's righteous. But then you think about it, and it's no, it's true. God is the only holy one, and if I want to succeed or be like do anything fruitful, I have to abide in him. I can only do fruitful things if I'm with Christ. So that was the whole point of dying to self. And then session 3 was called purpose. So what is our purpose? The main thing out of that one's a long one. So the main thing is to be in relationship with God. That was a really good session. And the last session was my favorite one. And it was, what is God's kingdom vision for the world? So we talked a lot about spiritual warfare. And just that we have an enemy that has come to kill, steal, and destroy. And realizing that, and then realizing that like our purpose out of that is to fight against it. So how do we fight against that actively? And then I want to read this. So Ephesians 6:12-13 says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the day of evil, and having done all to stand firm." Well, then it stops. It goes on, but it stops there. But it was just saying, it made me realize a lot about having an eternal mindset and knowing that there's so much more going on around me that I need to be aware of, and really being intentional about loving the people that are around me, because in the end, all we can do is love people and show them Jesus. So that's kind of what our sessions were about. Thank you. And here you go, Kaylee.
Okay, so I will be sharing about pods. Pods were a group of 5 to 6 people that were chosen by the RIC staff. So they didn't know us; they just randomly picked us, and we didn't find out who was in our pod until Monday morning when we got there. We did most of the things that we did at the at City Challenge. We did with our pods. So we did the prayer challenge, the prayer walk, all of our outreach and service projects. And then at night, we ended with pod time. So we just kind of debriefed and talked about our days with our pods. One thing that stood out to me through pods was that they were chosen so randomly, but we at the end of the week, everyone worked together very well, and there's a lot of new relationships built within the pods.
So I'm talking about free time, and free time was anything from card games, chess, to a pickup basketball game, and ping pong roundtable. Ping pong roundtable is 20 people playing one game of ping pong, and it was it's very hard to fit 20 people around one ping pong table. And I think over the week, playing ping pong like that, everyone got to know each other really well, and it just allowed for a lot of fellowship, and it was just pretty awesome. And then there was some free time after lunch one time, and so it was a bit of a competition to see who could eat a banana faster, but not eat a banana the normal way.
Wait, please. Here.
3, 2, 1. I started my time.
Oh, wait, really?
Go!
Oh my gosh!
No. Come on, Cody. No. Come on, Cody. No. I don't know. Oh, no. Look at him. So dumb. Eyes closed. Put the whole thing up.
Yeah, Phil won that.
So I get to talk about the interns, and the interns were basically 7 staff members who were basically camp counselors of City Challenge, and they would help everybody. They were so positive, and they had just finished the REACH program, so they all came back from wherever they were stationed, and Josh was the maintenance intern. He just came back from Albania. Karina was the hospitality intern, and she just came back from Albania also. Regina was the hospitality intern, and she came back from Nepal. Jeremy was a kitchen assistant, and he came back from Israel. Olivia was the outreach coordinator, and she came back from Laos. Nathaniel was the prayer coordinator, and he came back from Israel. And Courtney was the administrative assistant, and she came back from Thailand. So yeah, they were really positive throughout the whole thing, and they really helped us with all our challenges, and it was just a lot of fun to meet them, and yeah.
So I'm talking about the Dream Center, and the Dream Center was a church that in the evenings and sometimes breakfast, they would have a meal, and they would give it to the homeless. So when we got there, they had given us, like, we prayed, and then they were getting the meal ready, but the meal wasn't there. And turns out that the people who had the meal had ended up getting COVID. So then they couldn't bring the meal. But the lady who was in charge hadn't got the email. So we ended up going into the kitchen and just wrapping up some leftovers and different things. And then we went and passed them out among everybody. So we ended up having a good time.
I will also be talking about the Dream Center. And so after we passed out meals and drinks, we actually got to have some conversations with homeless people. And so some people from my pod, we got to talk to this guy named Val, and he was just very open and welcoming to us, and we had a very good conversation with him. And at the end of our conversation, he actually let us pray for him. So that was really cool.
So I'll be talking about brown bagging. So the first Monday when we got there, my pod, I was in Phil's pod, we got to go brown bagging. Brown bagging is basically just filling a brown paper bag with sandwich, pretzels, banana, and then we took a bunch of water along too because homeless people really like water. So we went to a place called Topiary Park. We drove to the park, found a place to park, and then we walked around for like 3 minutes, and then we saw a group of 4 guys sitting on a bench outside the library, like in the park. And Phil told me, Andre, Chloe, and Claudia to go over to those guys and talk to them. And obviously we were all really nervous and scared because it was all of our first mission trip, and we didn't want to, but Phil pushed us, and we finally went. And when we got there, we asked them if they wanted food, and they were really welcoming, and they said, yeah, we'd love some food. So we gave them food, and we had conversation with them for probably about 45 minutes. They were so welcoming and open. And we talked about anything from the Steelers to Jesus. And they pretty much gave us their whole life story. And then Phil and Kate were at another part of the park walking around looking for people. And close to the end, they came back, and Phil started talking to him too. And then we prayed for him at the end and, said goodbye. And it was really cool to see that just a conversation just a conversation, talking to people can brighten their day, and it can really have an impact on people. Oh, also, the one night, we did it every night, the one intern, her name was Olivia, she taught us a thing that was called Mad Props. It's basically where you just say a person's name and tell them something good they did that day. And I would just like to give Caden mad props because he got through the whole week with poison ivy all over his face. It was so swollen. I don't know how he did it, but he still got through the week and had a good week.
Yeah, Jamin couldn't have said it any better. I mean, you might as well have stuck an air hose in my mouth and sat there and pumped it up. That's how it looked for you. But, so what I'm going to talk about is our prayer challenge is what it was called. It was on Tuesday, which would have been our first full day there. It was put together by Nathaniel, the intern. As Sadie said, he was the prayer director, so he put together a program. There was a couple aspects to it. Basically, our pods, we split up. We drove into the city, and we had a couple challenges to do. There was some of the things. There was trivia questions about Columbus for us to find people, just to get us out there and talking with people. So that was a good way for us to, meet people, start conversations. We were challenged. We had a packet full of papers, and we were challenged to go to these places. And we had to find where the interns were stationed. Basically, they gave us challenges to do in this area. They would describe what was significant about, the people in this area, and then we'd go and we'd talk to people in the area. We were also told to find 5 churches in the city, just pray over them, pray over their leaders and the people inside of them. The biggest part probably was the lunch fund, you could say. We were given $1 a person for every person in our pod, plus $5, I think, for someone to buy lunch for a homeless person, especially. So basically our pod, I was in Sarah's pod, the best pod, obviously. We ended up, as soon as we started, we all made the decision, we don't care that much about lunch, but we just decided to pool all of our money and just buy, a better lunch for somebody. So we ended up getting a 6-inch sub, a drink, and a bag of chips that we ended up giving out pretty quickly. And then, everybody in our pod had about 3 chips a person for the whole day. It was over. But no, it was a really good experience. It usually in a prayer challenge like this, whenever you're walking around, you end up having experiences or encounters with people that, you weren't even attempting to. But yeah, just people like that, people walking around praying like that, it makes a big impact on the community. So that was a good experience.
Okay, so I will talk about a couple people that our pod saw on the prayer challenge. So first we saw Tiffany. Her name was Tiffany, and you probably don't remember, but last year when we went on the mission trip at Phil's house, we went down to Columbus and we did pretty much the same thing where we just walked around and prayed for homeless people. But Tiffany, we saw her last year. She was actually the person we gave our money to. I'm pretty sure this year she had the same story as last year, and Cody made the judgment call to give her all our money. So she's making some money out in the streets. Her story was she needed a room, a $20 donation for a YWCA room. So we gave her our money and we prayed for her, and she was very thankful. All her clothes were donated by people around the city, so she's pretty known. She's been there for a while. Oh, yes. She thought, so since she's pretty well known, she asked us if her name was on a website and if she was the second coming of Jesus. So she was interesting. And then the other person that I'll talk about is Mike. So Mike had he had cancer, liver cancer. He had liver cancer, and he only had about 4 months to live. So when we asked to pray for him, he was pretty thankful. And after we were done, he started tearing up and started crying. So it got to him, and he blamed it on his spicy chicken sandwich from McDonald's that he got. So yeah, he was pretty cool.
So I also have a story about the prayer challenge. And so we had just finished finding all the interns, and our pod was walking down this street, and it was not really the nicest looking street. And we came upon this group of 5 to 6 black people. So we decided to give our water to them that we got from one of the interns. So we gave it all out, and they were very thankful for it. And then we started walking away, and we heard one of the people say, "See, I told you all white people were nice." So we all really got a kick out of that.
For anyone that's curious, if you're looking to have an eating contest with someone, Phil's about the last person you'd want to because he's not losing anything like that. So I'm talking about brown bagging, what Jamin talked about, but this is on Wednesday. So my pod, we packed the brown bags at the RIC, and we went out to Columbus, and it was just kind of a discouraging day. It was really rainy, and so we had to like hide the brown bags under like our coats, or they would like rip, like get wet and rip. And so, and also, if you didn't know, when it rains, all the homeless people go away. Like they all go inside. And so, my group personally, we only found one person to give our brown bags to, even though we had like 6 or so. So it was pretty discouraging to go out there and not really feel like you're making a difference. But I'm gonna talk a little bit about Matt's group, because our pod kind of split up. And so they met a man named Kenneth, and pretty much Kenneth told Matt's group about how they saw the group the day before at the prayer challenge, and how they kind of made a difference in Kenneth's life. So I think it's cool how God works in different ways. Even though it was rainy, we were all discouraged because it was like we couldn't really get anything done. I think the most discouraging part about City Challenge is that you go pray for people that are really, really in need, like Mike, who had liver cancer, and then you leave. And then you're like, well, now what? You just keep praying for him. You don't really get to see the fruits of that prayer, the fruits of your labor. So it's really cool how even though you might not see those outcomes after you pray for somebody, they're there and they happen. And so I think that's what this group figured out, is that prayer is huge for people, and those fruits will come to bloom once we leave through that community.
So I'll be talking about RTNI. Me and my pod went out and handed out flyers for a church camp, and if they accepted it or declined it, we asked if we could pray for them and ask if there's anything we can do. It's a small neighborhood. Every time when we knocked, they would look outside the window, and there's like cameras set up everywhere, so they're pretty fearful. It's a lot different from Sugar Creek. One time we knocked on the door, a lady opened up, and she was on the phone with her insurance company, and she was crying, and we're asking her if we could pray for her, and she got really happy about that, and yeah.
So Chrissy and I are talking about the Somali village. We went to a Somali village on Wednesday, and it was like a big apartment complex, and there was not, like you could tell it wasn't very nice. So we were there for probably a half an hour, and there wasn't too many kids, so we just started walking around the complex, trying to find kids to play with. We brought balls and popsicles, so we played for probably like 2 or 3 hours. We just played with them. Yeah.
I am also talking about the Somali village. So when they said we're going to a Somali village, I thought it was like teepees everywhere with a dirt road in the middle. And it was just, I came and I was like, oh, it's apartments. Okay. So they tell us to go out and find kids to play with. Like, that's not creepy. People coming up a white van telling kids to come play with us. So we go and we find this mom and her daughter, and me and Allie start following them. And they kind of noticed that we started following them, so they ran into an apartment. But then we decided to go back, and then there were kids there, and we just started playing like volleyball with them and soccer, and they really loved to, when you gave them piggyback rides. And once like a couple kids were there, more kids started coming. And I was talking with the 2 girls, and apparently I look like I'm someone from YouTube. I don't know who. But yeah, it was just really fun to go and play with the kids.
I want to give mad props to Lakin, like Jamin was doing earlier, because we got there and it was raining and no one was, like there were no kids anywhere. So we were really creepy and started walking around and looking for kids. And it was probably to like the back wall of the building. Lakin saw kids like through a fence at a playground at a school. And she just like was like, hi, and was like trying to wave at them, and they like saw her and ignored her. And she just kept like talking and was like, do you think that we can climb over the fence or under the fence or get to them somehow so that they can come play with us? And she, yeah, mad props to her because she had a big heart for them and really wanted to find children to play with.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about our rec time. So on Wednesday night, we all went to a park and we played a game called Millerby. Basically, we split up into 2 teams, and there was one field, and we played soccer, ultimate frisbee, and ultimate football all on the same field at the same time. It was really chaotic, but it was really fun. Yeah, we had a fun time. And it was cool to see that even though we weren't like out doing outreaches and like serving and stuff, we could still have fun and like praise Jesus in different ways.
I'm going to be talking about RT and I the second day that we went. So we passed out flyers and went to people's houses, and people were like really afraid to answer the door, so they would always like look out at us and like, yeah. So we got to this one lady's house, and she let us inside, and she didn't have any kids to go to the summer camp, but we did get to pray for her and listen to her story, and that was really encouraging and fun for us to do that.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the Free Store. And so on Thursday, my pod went to help. And so pretty much what it is it's like a Goodwill. They just take donations from people, just anything from like clothes, toys, anything that people would want. And they also serve 3 meals a week for anybody who needs it, and then they go shop afterwards. So pretty much what we did there was me and Caden moved bookshelves around while the rest of my pod made a breakfast for people for this upcoming Monday. And while we were moving books around, we, just a funny story, we came across a book that was 20 questions about the Amish and Mennonite community. And here are just some of the questions. Why are the Amish such good farmers? Are they against education? Is food part of their religion? And don't they believe in having fun? So after we moved that and they got done, we started putting some shelves together. It was kind of a bit of a puzzle to figure out at first, but yeah, we got it done. It was just a good way to see God work because it brought a very diverse community of people together that in a Christian setting, that in most cases, these people would have never come to that kind of setting. So it's a really good way to introduce God to them.
So I will be talking about the organization that my pod and Matthew and Cody's pod went to on Thursday. It was called the Life Care, and when we got there, we split into different groups, and my group went to the food closet, and we stocked the shelves and pre-bagged some of the groceries. And then we went over to the other group, and they were making sandwiches, and we made boxes for people to come and be able to get food. And it was just really fun to be able to make the food for them. And I think all the workers were really overjoyed that we were able to help them get this done pretty quick.
I'm going to be talking about our prayer walk. Our prayer walk was on Thursday morning. And basically, we just got together in our pods and we prayed for direction and signs for and to go out into the city. So then we prayed for about half hour, and then after that, our pod went out into town and we walked around. And personally, for me, God gave me the color yellow. So then we were walking down the street, and I saw a yellow house So I was like, hey, I want to pray for that yellow house. So then we stopped and we prayed for the house and the people in it. And we prayed that they would just, God would just keep them safe. And then later on in outreach, me, Phil, and Claudia were finished doing our outreach project. So then Andre, during when he was praying, he saw a red turtle. And we were like, where are we going to find a red turtle? But me, Phil, and Claudia were walking down this alleyway, and we were done with our outreach, so we decided to go on a prayer walk. And we saw this playground with a house next to it, and I'm like, there's a red turtle. And it was one of those children's sandboxes that you can like open up, and it was shaped like a turtle, and it was red. So we prayed for the playground and the house, and yeah, I just thought it was really cool. And this is one of my highlights of the week because it was cool to see how God worked like that.
So Thursday night was our last night, and we split up guys and girls. And I was with the guys because I am a guy. Shocker, right? And so the purpose of ministry night is to pretty much just share what's on your heart at that time or over, I don't know, the course of your life, your testimony, and just kind of share your struggles with your brothers and what you're going through. And it was really good. Everybody ended up sharing, and the few things that came out of it was, one, it's to recognize sin in your life, to realize that you are a sinner, and this is stuff you're going through. And after that, you gather around and you pray with guys who are your brothers, and it's just really powerful. And once you realize you're a sinner, it's like, well, where do we go from then? And that's Christ. We point ourselves to Christ and what he did for us, and it puts an emphasis on the cross and how that sin is dead. And then also, like, it brought us together into community. Like, everybody was talking about how, like, we have each other, and this life was not meant to be lived on our own. And this is something that was, like, many of them had expressed how they wanted to take it home and, like, be more serious about living in community. And yeah, they all did so well. It was an amazing night, and I would just ask your kid, make sure he's keeping up with his accountability with his brothers in his group, because like there was a lot of you could tell the Spirit was moving in that. And then after, the boys were so excited that we all got together into me and Cody's room, threw every mattress on the floor. We slept together that night all in one room. There was like 10 of us, and they're not very big rooms. Phil got us excited. You can ask him how he did that. I won't tell you. And we just had a great night. It was awesome.
Oh, it's my turn to share. So I guess I wanted to quickly share on meals before I go into some of the other things I wanted to talk about. So the meals, they had us all in pods as we've described, and every day there was one pod in charge of setting up and then taking down that meal. And the meals were usually pretty strange. So she made baked oatmeal, and she made chocolate baked oatmeal. And does anyone remember the vegetable that she put in the baked oatmeal? She put carrots in one, beets. She put beets into baked oatmeal. And what did she put in the macaroni? She put squash in the macaroni, like macaroni and cheese. And you could barely tell. She loves sneaking in vegetables into her dishes. But it was just really cool to see them embracing most of it was different cultural foods. So it was really cool to see them embracing that, and also embracing the cleaning up and the setting up, because you'd have to wake up at 7:30 to make breakfast at 7:45, and then everyone could have it at 8. And I want to give mad props to Andre. They have a sprayer system where you rinse the dishes and then you put them in this tray, and then there's an industrial dishwasher. So you got this spray hose with one hand, and the other hand you hold the plate and you spray it. And the first, I think it was breakfast or lunch, I'm not sure which, I was doing dishes right next to him, pots and pans, and he was just going to town on that sprayer. And at the end of his cleaning, his shirt was just like drenched. and then for dinner, I was like, hey, Andre, there's like aprons right over there. He's like, oh yeah, I want one. So I don't know, I just thought that was kind of funny that like, you know, at the time it didn't faze him. He was like, whatever, my shirt is wet, but I'm going to get these dishes clean. And I think that was something that I noticed throughout the entire week with this entire group. They were really good at putting aside their personal, maybe the things that they were going through, the things they were uncomfortable with. They were very good at like putting that aside to further God's kingdom, either in Columbus with the people we were talking to, or God's kingdom in this group, because they knew that we were coming back here, and it's something that we can bring back to Holmes County. Because all the things we did in City Challenge, we might not ever see the fruits of that, but we can come back and bring that here as well. And one of the cool things that I want to also share and encourage the parents and also just the people in this congregation, they had a Bible study, I think it was a Bible study or an exercise as a group that we did in our pods. And it was a spiritual giftings / passions. Like, what has God gifted you with? And it was really cool to hear, at least in my pod, to hear some of the things that they have seen that God has blessed them with. And to me, it was cool because during that, I think it was 20 or 30 minutes that we had to go off by ourselves and pray and see what God had given us as a spiritual gifting. For me, instead, what I did was I asked to see, I asked God to place on my heart what I saw in my pod. And it was really cool to see how the things that I saw were similar to the things that they saw in themselves. And what it challenged me with is, now that I know what some of these amazing kids have gifts in, I want to push them out in that. I want to give them chances in our church to do that. Because I think Jimmy said this is the leader, this is your church of the next generation. And so I guess I would just challenge you, if you're a parent, ask your kid what they wrote down as their spiritual gifting, and then be like, okay, now what are you going to do about it? And maybe help them. Maybe give them ideas of, well, this is something you could do, or this is something you can do. And as a church, we can do that as well. Even if your kid is not up here, you can still ask them, hey, what are you gifted about? Or what do you feel like God has put a passion on your heart for? And it can be something really simple like sports. Like sports is something that I feel a lot of us have a gifting or passion in that. And we can use that to glorify God, but we need to find ways to do that. And I want to finish with a bunch of mad props. So I think Jamin described what mad props were. So it's pretty much you point someone out and you say either something good that they did or something somehow that you saw them allowing God to work through them, or something that they did to further the kingdom. And most of these are from my pod just because, they were the ones closest to me. So I already talked about Andre. His work ethic was incredibly hard. We were walking during RT&I. I was with the group walking around handing out brochures, or not brochures, but pamphlets for the summer camp. And Andre was left behind to do yard work, and it was like a crazy yard. It was just bonkers how much grass and weeds were here. And me, Chloe, and Claudia were walking like in a back alleyway on the back side of the house, and we just see Andre coming around the corner with like an entire bush over his head. And so we finished our walk of handing out these flyers, and then we went back to the house, and we were like, hey, Andre, can we help you with anything? He's like, no, I'm good. You guys can go out and do your prayer walk. And it was during that prayer walk that we saw the red turtle that he had seen that morning. And Chloe kind of touched on that, but the cool thing was we didn't see it in the first time that we walked. And it wasn't until the second time that we walked that we saw, which was like 5 hours later. And so for me, it was a very small reminder that God's timing is not the same as our own. Because if we had gone out and didn't see it in the first one and we're super discouraged and we're like, now I'm not even going to try looking for it. Instead, we were like, no, I'm going to keep trying to see what God has planned for me. I want to keep seeing where God wants me to pray. And we ended up praying for that house. And she didn't share this, but there was a red turtle and a yellow slide. And the yellow color was her color. So, and there was a couple other things that were around that house as well that were like, we definitely needed to pray for this place. And if it hadn't been for them wanting to walk around and do that after we had walked around for an hour. And if it hadn't been for Andre's work ethic to like, no, you guys go do it, then we wouldn't have seen that. We wouldn't have prayed for that house. The other two guys that I really want to give mad props to are Matt and Cody. It was so much fun to have those two guys along. They made it so fun for the guys, I think. Does anyone remember the song that they were singing? What? It was like a country song or something, and they were all singing in the shower together, and it was like the loudest thing. Like like even in the hallway where we were, or the room where we were playing games, you could hear like just this ruckus noise coming from the guy's shower, and a lot of what is the sound you guys made, Matthew? Well, hello, but the other one, they're like really yelled. Yeah, that one too. I can't do it. I'm not very good at it, but anyways, you can ask all these guys, and they'll probably be able to rehearse it for you. And I think what was really cool was that the interns also noticed how hardworking these kids are and how self-aware they are. Matthew kind of talked about ministry night was a time of seeing your own sins. And one of the images that was shared to me that I hadn't ever heard before, but it was a silversmith. And the way a silversmith knows that his silver is pure and that all the impurities have been taken out of it is that he can see his reflection in that silver, in that pot of silver. And that's what Jesus wants to do with us. He wants to take all those impurities out of us so that when he looks at us, he sees himself, because we are his creation. We are created by God, and we're created in him, in his image. And I just thought that was really cool to hear that the interns saw that in us as well. So now is the time where we can do mad props. It's very simple, and you guys all have to participate. You go like this, mad props, and that's it. It's pretty straightforward. So I want you guys to give mad props to this youth group because, as Lexi said, they gave up an entire week of prime summertime to go to Columbus and to maybe be hungry, get poison ivy, get tired, sore feet, whatever else they got. They did that because they believed in bringing the kingdom to Columbus, and they believed in trying to grow this youth group as one unit and bring that back here. Is that it, Lexi? That's it. I got the thumbs up. So let's do mad props. Everybody? Mad props! And I think we're good to worship. It's closed, right?
There are so many more stories and just moments of really seeing God work that we could share with you. We could go on for a very long time. So I encourage you, if you know one of the youth that went personally, or even if you don't, go up and ask them. A great question to ask is, how did you see God work? What was one of the ways that you saw God moving through you or through another person in the youth group? Just asking and challenging them with that question. I'm sure they'll be willing to share. So we have one more song of worship this morning, and then you guys are dismissed, but you can stand with us as we sing Living Hope.